Hello. In the next 30 minutes, I would like to talk about two open source products and solution in the world of cloud infrastructure and how which of them fill up the other. Both products have many options and abilities, and we can talk about each one of them for hours. And here I assume basic or more than basic knowledge with oVirt and virtualization, so bear it in mind. Please raise questions and comments just beside the video. You have a comment area, and I'll try to follow it, but I'll answer at the end of the session. I hope we'll have time for that. If not, you can reach me in any time by mail or in the IRC channel, IRC channel oVirt. It's written here in the main page. But now I want to raise a specific scenario in everyday life that personally really annoying me and cost me a lot of effort. Or as I want to put it, bare metal to utilize hypervisor on the cloud. That's how I like to call this presentation. When I say bare metal, I mean the physical hardware without any personality. And when I say cloud, I mean your server farm. If it's 1, 2 server, private cloud, up to public environment. My name is Yaniv. I'm 28 years old, living and grew up in Israel. I work in Red Hat for 2 years, and as a software engineer at Red Hat, I work a lot with remote communication to my testing server or a server that I compiling my software on. And most of the time I want it not to be under my desk, to be next to my legs. I prefer to put it somewhere in the enterprise location, like the server room that we have. So this is how it looks like, the real world. In any enterprise, it could be different, but the room is not so nice to be there. It's cold and messy, and I prefer to do everything remotely and not spend time there. The reason to go there can be either you lost communication to your server, you have operation system crash or something that you did wrongly and and require you the need to go and find solution for that physically with the server, or when a new server arrived to your enterprise and you want to initialize it. So let's analyze the process of going and managing a server. In the session, in the 30 minutes that we have, I will try to go over how do we manage a server, the lifecycle server. We will talk about the bare metal in real life, what is Foreman, and how the solution give us Foreman can give us a solution for the lifecycle of server. How can we empower our data center with virtualization, and how we do it with oVirt, and the integration between the two, and where it goes. So when we start about looking at the common process of starting a server from bottom to up, we have 3 main steps. We have the provision part, when we turn on the computer, the server, and installing the operation system. We have the configuration phase, when we're setting up whatever we need it to do. We have the monitor part, when we update the packages on it, putting new fixes on it, or if you want to stop its life and just throwing this server away. Let's going inside and analyze the process of having a new server in your enterprise. So if this is your data center, a new server arrived, or bunch of server arrives, it depends. You connect them to the network and to the power, and then the phase of installing OS comes to the picture. You need to connect to it, or either doing with a Pixie boot. And after you installing the operation system, you need a physical intervention. In this phase, we call Frank, or another guy that you have in your company, that needs to come with his laptop and start to sign up each server with a label by writing its MAC address, the physical MAC address, which is unique for each hardware, and sign the computers with the labels. And that's the way we can recognize where the the server that we connect to it remotely really located. Now, after we know which server does related to what, we give the names and IP address and host name. Now we can initialize the setup. It's either related to the use case. You can have it as a DHCP server, DNS, oVirt, or whatever you want to do on it. And now you can just monitor, update, and start to manage it. But what if you have a problem in one of the server and the guy comes back to find the problem and he needs to search for A5C label and he find out that he has a typo or the MAC address not exist in the data center, and now he needs to connect to each one of the server and try to figure it out. Where is it and what's wrong? And he's gonna spend a lot of time in this room that not so comfortable to be. So what do we want to achieve with remote management in this part? We want, firstly, to have the bare metal provisioning. We have the server inside our data center, and now we want it to register somehow to one central management system. When we have that, we have the ability to locate the physical hardware. The management system is supposed to give us enough information to know where is it physically and know its specification, to know what it able to do. After we have this, we can configure and monitor it as we saw before. In that part, Foreman comes to the picture, open source solution. This is a product to manage your hardware and its life cycle in your enterprise. And let's see how with Foreman on your system, how you can manage the same flow that I just showed without having the intervention of physical human being going to your server farm. When you connect your server again, now Foreman will send a tiny OS. I will show how it works and what protocol it uses for that later on. And when you send the tiny OS, if you have a screen, you can see that the server will boot up to Foreman discovery image. This image is really small and it's boot up very fast, and then Foreman's the server automatically will send, when it's boot up, all the information, all its specification to Foreman. In that way, now Foreman, if we look at the Foreman UI, we can see that it discovers all the hosts that just connected to the network. You can see their IP and when it happened, and if you click on one of them, you can see more specification about the host, like the MAC address that it has, and a lot of information that can help you to recognize and decide what you want to put on this server. And when you connect to it, you know where is it physically, so it's easy for you to sign it as you want. Now when we all have this recognition for the server, we can start to manage it, the life cycle of it. As we saw before, we have the three phases: the provision part, the configuration part, and the management part. How Foreman does that? First, for the provision part, Foreman gives you a Pixie boot, and it allows you to choose if you want to use whatever operation system you want to install on it. And so it's such that easy that you just pick the installation media, and the host will boot up with this media and start to install. For the configuration phase, you describe Puppet classes or Chef classes to configure your password, your keys, user services that you wanted to run, define the configuration files that you need on the host, and what's even greater in Puppet, that you can even get the reports for each one of the scripts that you put. You can know if it ran or if it failed, or even you can run it again if you need to get to clean environment on your server. So those are the protocol that Foreman uses for that. And then you can start managing it as you want. You can run the updates or get the console to it. And as we said before, management is the easiest part. You can get back to the configuration part if you want from Foreman. and we have all we need remotely. If we look inside, drill down to Foreman, I don't want to talk about it too much, but we have here a lot of oVirt users that might don't not familiar with what Foreman's include in it. So I just mentioned that Foreman uses smart proxies that allows you the DNS, DHCP, TFTP, and Puppet protocols on it. The services run there, and each computer that you connect to the network gets an IP address, an host name, and the Pixie boot that we saw before. It can be in different servers. It not has to be in one hardware. You can separate it, and Foreman integrate with it. You just configure it inside the Foreman UI. The second part is the UI, the interface that Foreman provides. You have API and CLI also. For the configuration part, as I mentioned, we have the template of the boot, the provision template. We use Anaconda for that. We have host groups, which means a group of attributes that you can set. You define the OS on it, the subnet. You will see a screen of it in a few slides. We have the Puppet classes that you declared before. They are related to the host group, and specific parameters that you can add. In addition to that, we have the compute resources in Foreman that allows you even better management after you provision the host. For example, if you integrate libvirt to Foreman, you can see the virtual machine that the host runs. And it can fill you also the gap of knowing what happened on the host. So saying that, is it enough? It does enough for physical server, but if you want to include also virtualization in our data center and include also network and storage aspects and virtual machines. When we're talking about virtualization, we see many components, as I said. Also quality of servers, migrations, declaration, and such. oVirt is a 7-year-old alternative for virtualization infrastructure management. It's based on KVM technology that still grow up very fast. And let's see how we manage to make new server and hypervisor, which means to allow us, oVirt, to create and manage virtual machine with its hardware. So let's go back to Frank and see how new server gets to be managed by oVirt for virtualization purposes these days, before the integration. Now we get the server and we wonder how can we make it an hypervisor. So Frank needs to connect the server to the network, and he needs to provision it, which means to install the operation system. After we're done with that, we have an IP address, and now we can start to configure it for oVirt. The configuration phase are done by oVirt itself. If you see in the screen, you're just adding the host, the IP address, you give it the root password, and then starting the configuration automatically for you. The process of initialization starting, which is called oVirt host deploy, if you ever heard about this part of the software, where oVirt communicates with SSH protocol and install all the requirements, mainly VDSAM package on the host, what makes the host an hypervisor. This process is exactly equivalent to the same configure phase in service lifecycle that we saw before. oVirt does it for you. Now you can start VMs and play with it. If you're familiar with oVirt, you know the screen, and you can set whatever you want in the host. And now, as we saw, almost the full life cycle, but we still needed a physical intervention, right? We still needed to go there and provision the host. But in oVirt 3.5, oVirt introduces an advanced integration between Foreman and oVirt. With this integration, we see that we can do the process much easier and without our need to go and provision by ourselves. Let's see how it works. oVirt has the ability to have external provider not only to Foreman, it has only other providers that use. And in this phase, when we have the Foreman install and the oVirt install, we can start and add the information about the Foreman that we have. There are more providers like Glance, Cinder, but I don't want to get inside them. You can ask me later if you want. And when adding the provider to your oVirt management system, it means that the communication between them can start, and the REST API can be used by oVirt. In this phase, oVirt gets update from Foreman. So if we get new shipment now to our data center, automatically, as we saw before, all the servers turns up, send their MAC addresses to Foreman, and now oVirt is able to pick up those MAC addresses with the IP address and all the information that we saw before. If you look at the screen, you see that now in add auth, oVirt expose the discovered servers that inside the external provider that you just added. You see the information about the name that they got from Foreman, their MAC addresses, and the subnet that they are into. All that Foreman can provide from the discovery phase can be added here. In Foreman, as we saw before, this is the screen for the discovery hosts, and this is what oVirt can show you without the need to go to Foreman and do it manually. For the second part, oVirt allows you to choose the host group that you want to use. Host group, as I said before, and I told you that I will get back to it later, is a bunch of attributes that you install on the host. Which operation system, which network domain to add the servers to, what architecture the server needs to be installed to, and what the subnet. You can even add more parameters like what Puppet classes you want it to run, but currently that's what we expose. You need to define the host group before you get to this phase. In this screen in Foreman, oVirt not allowed to define new host group for you. You need to have the setup already before you start the integration. Host group helps you to provision many hosts with the same configuration at once. Host group, as I said, it's full set of attributes that you want to add to your host. If we move on, now you need to choose the compute resource. As I explained, this allows to communicate with external providers by Foreman. In this part, when we had the external provider, we allow oVirt to talk with Foreman with the permissions of the user that we had there. For the other way around, we had a compute resource for oVirt inside Foreman, and we choose it here to allow Foreman to notify oVirt about the provisioning phase, if it ends, if it failed, and so on. So you need to pick the compute resource that allows you to communicate the communication to oVirt in this part. You declare it in Foreman in this screen. Okay, so now once we have all set up and we choose an host, we choose the host group, and we choose the compute resource, we can go on and start to provision the host. It's just OK on the add host form. And when we click OK, the host turns to added to the host list in installing OS status. I don't have a screenshot of that, but trust me that in installing OS status, when this starts up, Foreman send the provision command to the host. The API request after the provision ends sent back to oVirt, and when the OS is ready and the host is up with an IP address set on it, oVirt can start the deploy phase. As we said before, the deploy phase it's the configuration part It runs the oVirt OS deploy, installing all the requirements that that oVirt needs to communicate with the OS as an hypervisor and start managing the virtual machines on it, the storage and the networking without your intervention. And you can start the management phase. That's the full picture. Now we have utilized hypervisor on our data center, and all we needed was to connect the servers to the power and network. We didn't need any intervention physically with the server. It works with also with to provision oVirt node. If you're familiar with this distribution, Rev hypervisor, or any other distribution of operation system. Other than that, we have another integration with Foreman that allows you to see all the already provisioned hosts. We had it even before 3.5. If you saw that before, I'm just saying that so you will know what is the second radio button that you have there. Those servers should be already provisioned, and you can just add them and use them as hypervisor. We plan also to add VM provisioning, full host configuration management through oVirt, and multiple selection for host provisioning. There are some projects that's a search solution in the same area, some as like Triple and Ironic. I won't elaborate about them because those don't integrate to oVirt, but coming to solve specific provision solution. And that's all about the integration. I just want to say, to summarize, that Fedora, Foreman, it's almost 3 years old open source project. We have a lot of contributors. You can see the homepage and the IRC channel and join if you have questions from them specifically for the setup. And over it also you have the list. If you have any questions, you can feel free and join me to test it. I also have the IRC channel. I'm going to present this session also at the Cloud Open Conference in Chicago next week. So if you'll be around, you are more than welcome to join. And as I like to say, don't trust me about the recommendation that I gave you about using those alternatives to try to leverage your data center. I encourage you to try it yourself and find out that it really helps for your needs. So thank you for joining me. Let's see if you have any questions. I don't see any comment aside. So if you do, this is the time. So thank you, everybody. Bye.